Hello guys, and welcome back to another video. I have spent the past 2 weeks finishing the AI film score generator, and today I will tell you how I went from barely generating an 8-second song to finishing everything. The first problem I fixed was that instruments had notes way out of their range that I didn't even put in the training songs. Turns out this was because the way the AI made the notes was completely flawed. Basically, it would first find random note memories which had the 2 previous notes or chords inside, and was in the proper chord progression. If it didn't have any memories of that, then it would lower the required conditions, until it basically just picks a random note. The only problem is that 9 out of 10 times, it did not have a specific memory. This turned out to be because it didn't update the previous 2 notes every time. And because if the notes weren't in the proper chord progression the first time, which is very rare, then the memory wouldn't even be considered. So after fixing this, the notes were finally in the correct octave, and I could finally hear some hints that the AI actually learned from the training songs. Then, I realized that there were still problems with the rhythms, as all the timpanis and cymbals were offbeat. After breaking the entire rhythm learning system again, I realized that there was really nothing wrong about it. So I decided to make the rhythm learning system more specific, so notes wouldn't start at odd times. But the songs still sounded very terrible. Like, how was this supposed to be happy and dramatic? None of the notes even fit into the chord progressions. So, I looked into the code which forced everything to be in the correct key, and it turns out it was basically completely broken, so I fixed it. It didn't really change the fact that the songs were complete garbage, but at least they had major chords instead of minor chords. Because of this, I decided to start training the AI in other moods. After spending about 2 days debugging the melody instrument system just to realize I inputted the data incorrectly, I finally finished the suspicious mood. I also forced the snare instrument's note numbers to either be 37 or 38, because these were the side stick and snare drum notes. Then, after I trained the AI in the suspense mood, for a few measures, it actually generated the exact notes and rhythms of a part in a training song. This made me feel confident that the AI finally worked how I intended it to. So I spent the next 3 days making training songs for all the other moods, then inputting them into the AI trainer. I even made a fully automatic trainer which could train multiple moods at once. Along the way, I also added 3 more moods which I thought the AI needed last time I used it, which were the action, rhythm, shock, and mystical moods. Then, I redesigned the interface. Last time I made a film score with it, I felt that it needed to be way more customizable, and that when making the keyframes, I should get an idea of what the AI would generate. So, I added optional choices to modify instruments of different parts, as well as adding a choice to make the melody any instrument in the entire general MIDI list. I also made the themes more customizable, because in my previous film score, I could barely tell it used any themes, even though most of the score used them. Finally, I made it so that in each keyframe, you could add different key moments, so you wouldn't have to make a new keyframe for every tiny mood change. The key moments would modify short sections of certain parts, which could be customized. Then, I got to coding the interface. In the middle of coding, I found out that several items of the numbers list, which basically everything in my project uses, were uppercase variants of other items, which means that Scratch counts them as the same. This could seriously skew the data, so I changed the items to random non-printing characters with an ASCII number below 32, then retrained all the moods. Then, randomly, all the interface code vanished, leaving only a few blocks left. I tried all sorts of things to get it back, such as duplicating the sprite, adding blocks from my backpack, and copying the project, but it just wouldn't work. But finally, I exported the interface sprite so I could restart the project starting with the sprite by itself, but when I re-imported the sprite, all the code suddenly came back. Well, except for about 400 blocks, and a bunch of custom blocks, which I had to recode. But after a day of fixing everything, I could finally return to coding the interface. But then, when I was coding the project opener, and I put a non-print character into the code, all the code vanished for a second time. So I did what I did last time, and exported and imported the sprite. Everything was back, except for the non-print character code. That led me to the conclusion, non-print characters corrupt Scratch projects. But yeah, after that, I made all the modifications you could make in the interface actually affect the generation. This includes modifying the instruments, changing rhythms, notes, keys, and volume, and using themes. Turns out the modified versions actually sounded worse than the unmodified ones, so I made the modifications less extreme. And yeah, I was then basically done with the whole thing. Now, I was ready to start a new film score. So, I started. As I went, I fixed several bugs with the display and keyframing, as well as added a dot which moves around to keep me focused. Then, once I got used to the interface, I started a timer to see how efficient this software was. The results were about 7.2 minutes of film score per hour of work, which is pretty similar to last time's results. Took me approximately 1 hour of work to get 8 minutes of the music done. Either way, making film scores this way is still many times faster than making one manually, even if the film scores it makes are many times worse. Anyways, that concludes this series for the second time. This concludes the series of me making a film score generator. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and bye.